Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about the Honoring Women's Rights Conference on September 8th, 2012 at the Steinbeck Center in Salinas, California. We're also going to speak with two women right now named Cecilia Barajas and Natasha Lasky. They are a mother and daughter. Natasha, what do your friends think? And how do you talk to your mother about being a feminist? I know your mother is a feminist, and so talk to us.
Well, I personally consider myself a feminist, and I know my mom is definitely, and we definitely have a lot of conversations about that. Women's rights aren't really discussed with me and my friends, and my friends really don't want to use the word feminist. Like, even if they agree with feminist ideals, they don't want to use the word.
The girls in your high school, they talk about the war on women. Does it mean anything to them? Is it kind of crazy?
They really don't know that much about, like they kind of assume that everything is equal because they haven't really had that education.
Right,
but
well, it is supposed to be equal.
Yeah, but I mean, there's still so much inequality.
Right. So let's bring up the first slide. This one was written in by the Susan B. Anthony Friends in 1894. No self-respecting woman should wish or work for success of a party that ignores her sex. This is amazing that they had this poster that they wrote on a piece of material, and they gathered together in the 1800s. This is before World War I, and I think people thought they were crazy. They didn't, of course. They could see the future. They were visionaries. So, as a mother, Cecilia, do you talk to your daughter about Susan B. Anthony?
Well, I don't think we talk about Susan B. Anthony per se, because her name, while it's studied in elementary schools as part of probably the American core curriculum, one of the few women that make it into the history books. I think we talk more about feminism from a contemporary standpoint, from like the power of sexuality, and in middle school, for example, with the short shorts, to
What do you mean short shorts?
Well, I was just at a debate where one girl was talking about how she should be able to wear incredibly short shorts, and it was against the dress code in the public school that they're thinking about implementing. And we were talking about why do adolescents wear what people would consider provocative, clothing, and how it's part of the arsenal for women. At least I think it's one of the few areas of power that have traditionally been used by women to have power. And how sometimes that becomes prioritized over other values that women bring, such as intellect, and sort of the tension between those two.
You're right. I think that is a real tension between those two. We have another slide. Here is, and this is a real-life Rosie the Riveter in 1943 during World War II, so we skipped ahead 50 years or so. And she's a black woman working in Tennessee. And do you know about the Rosie the Riveter story, Natasha?
Well, I do. Well, I'm aware of like the poster and all of the kind of mythology surrounding it. I don't know all that much about the actual history surrounding the event.
Let me ask you this, because they do a very interesting project in their school, which is called the Decades Project, where each group in the history class takes on a decade. Yeah. When they took on the 40s and World War II, did they discuss the impact on women of the various wars?
Yeah, well, they did discuss how women were able to get jobs and go off to work. They didn't really discuss the dark underbelly of that, where once all of the men returned, they were forced to quit their jobs and go back to like mending the house and that kind of thing.
What kind of impact do you think it had on those women?
Well, I mean, to have a job, and then, I mean, I can't even imagine. It must have been really hard for the women to completely make that transition back after finally being able to work.
Although one could argue, what an incredible gift, what a silver lining to this terrible war it was that women first tasted this power. And even if you're watching shows like Downton Abbey, which are talking about a different side of the coin, where women who have of means are suddenly tasting the value that in the sense of accomplishment of being in the workplace. So I haven't studied the intellectual history of this, but after the World War II, when women had to go back into the 50s little, domestic sphere, maybe that effect never ended, and maybe the ripple effect was the birth, the re-emergence of the women's movement in the 60s and 70s.
With the book of the feminine mystique.
Yes.
Because these women were depressed.
Yeah.
And that's what the feminine mystique brought out.
Yeah.
It seems interesting how the government and the big businesses were in collusion, it seems to me. You know.
Yeah.
So we're gonna bring up one more slide. It's a cartoon. It's a modern day cartoon. Uncle Sam and the Statue of Liberty, right? Male and female. Uncle Sam says, we can't pay teachers. We can't pay social workers or nurses or child care providers. And she says, just say it. You just can't pay women. Right? Because those are all classically women jobs.
Yeah.
Women's jobs, caretakers and children care. So that's today. This was a cartoon that I saw in the paper 2 months ago.
Wow.
So, you know, during all the heat of this war on women and all this political justification of like, well, you know, you're with us because we don't want to pay for birth control, or no, you're with us because we believe that gay people get married, right? So it's just ridiculous for me. But I think underneath everything is this inequity in pay still, you know, and it stems from way worse than that. Not you don't get the same pay, you don't get the job.
Wow. Yeah.
When I was your age, do you remember this? Men's work, female, you know, there's women's job listings and men's job listing. It was really depressing.
Yeah.
You can't get a job.
I mean, although I think times are changing, and I think to some degree on that cartoon women constitute way more than nursing and teaching, although those may be predominantly female careers. Women are entering and have in other fields like law and you know, various medicine and engineering.
Yeah, that's true.
And in your class, one of the
Definitely.
things that's just profoundly amazing to me is almost all of her friends would classify themselves as math sciences. And I don't know if it's a response to the economy and people view that as a safe harbor. But when you say that?
Definitely. And I think a lot of my friends do have really like huge career ambition, and they don't really realize that there's still so much inequality in pay and in getting jobs.
And rising through the ranks. So we'll see what happens when you leave high school, when you go through college, and then when you go into the workplace. When I was in college, I have a couple degrees in physics. You have a degree in law. When I was in college, I was one of the only women in my class. I'd sit up in the front. If there wasn't any other women, I never knew it because they sat in the back and were quiet. So I don't believe they're there because they didn't speak up. And in work, you know, it's difficult. It's just difficult to be the first. And hopefully when you get there, it's not going to be like that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure, you know, I'm hopeful. But I do think that being tough, and one of the things that I tell her, which may seem completely crazy, is like I say you have to not be afraid to be a bitch. And to be, I don't know if you're allowed to say that on a cable access.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the problems that her generation and our generation felt, for sure, is this culture of niceness and the importance of being nice.
Being strong. And being strong is not being a bitch. It's just what someone will call you to try and push you down.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think that's what happens with women, who, and it's been shown in various studies that women who are successful, if you change their name from, you know, Helen to Howard, and you show it as a case study at Harvard Business School, all the guys will say, I want to work for the man, and when they present it as the real case scenario of the woman who was the successful business person, they say, nah, she's a little crafty, cunning, ambitious. We don't want to work for her. And I think when you're in a competitive male environment, you have to be competitive, and oftentimes that's not considered a feminine quality. And I see it in her friends, because I'll say, why don't you do this? You say this. And like, no, I won't be nice. People will think I'm not nice. So I'm kind of trying to cultivate that a bit.
So this conference is going to explore these questions, and later in the show we're going to have some of the panelists that are going to be in the conference, or at least in the audience, discussing it with the panelists, and there'll be speakers as well, and films, and there's actually going to be a musical called We Did It For You, and it goes through the whole history from Susan B. Anthony to modern times. It's an amazing musical. So there's a question up on the screen right now by Krishnamurti, and we look at this question, and it's about understanding the problem in order to get the answer. So I'm going to leave it. We can think about it. We'll be quiet for a moment, watch this or look at this and think about it, and I'll see you at the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.